Is it started? Recording pending, it says for me.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
now recording.
It's now started. Okay, so in the first problem, you had an array of n integers and you want to pick the first k least numbers from them. For that, you will sort the array, and for sorting, you have to use the sort function which is inbuilt, sort of a comma a plus n. That takes a lesser time to sort than the regular things like bubble sort or something that you'd have learned. So use the sort function. And for summing up these toy costs, you have to use long int. I had even given a warning here, but some of you just used integers, variables, and you expected the answer to come. Because AI goes from 0 to 10 power 9, the sum can go till 10 power 14. And your regular integer variable can only accommodate till around 2 into 10 power 9. And for higher values, you have to use long int. So that was an error that I had found. So do you guys have any doubts in the solution to this? You sort and you pick the first k elements. A pretty simple solution. If you have any doubts, I guess Quartz can unmute them. I might not be able to see chat. I've given, so I see no doubts. I'll go to the next problem. So matrix traversal. The gist of the problem is you have a n cross m matrix and you have to start from the first cell and you have to go to the last cell by traveling through each cell exactly once. So I'll maybe open Zideboard for this alone. So suppose you have a, let's say you have a 2 cross 2 cell. If you have a 2 cross 2 cell, you'll start here, you'll maybe go like this, and then go like this, but you've not reached this cell. You have to start here and reach here. So for 2 cross 2, you're not able to do that. For 2 cross 3, you can go like this and it will work. So if you see, if you have an odd number of if this edge length is odd, you can reach like this by doing a zigzag pattern, irrespective of whether it's odd or even. You could have used this strategy even for 3 cross 3. So if one of the edges is odd, you have a solution. You can go like this in a zigzag manner. If both edges are even, you don't have an answer. So that's all the question is. If either of one of them is odd, you are cool. If neither of them is odd, you have to print out a no. That's all the solution to this problem is. Any doubts here? I see no doubts again. Quads, if you see any doubts, you can tell me.
Yeah, someone has raised their hand.
Okay.
Yes, Hemant, you can unmute yourself.
Basically, we cannot go back in the question. No, they have said j plus 1 and j plus 1. While going back in the row, it means j minus 1. No?
Okay, yeah, this should have been j minus 1. Yeah, sorry. I think this got missed out. Yeah.
So yesterday I was stuck with that lot of time.
Okay. We are sorry for that. J plus 1 should have been there. So what exactly the operation be? So going to an upper cell. Okay. Yeah, it should have been j plus 1. We apologize for the issue. So if it's j plus 1, you can do j minus 1. You can do now, right?
I have a doubt for j minus 1 once. I mean, if both are even, we cannot go.
Both are even, you can't go. We have 2 cross 2. You can only go like this. So you're not ending up here. Because when you start like this, you want to when you go in this direction, you want to come back in the same direction, and that you can do only if the number of arrows is odd. So I went down, then up, then down. So if you have both even dimensions, you can't have start with down and end with down. So you're gone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this will changing now is not much of a use, but yeah, next time we'll be careful about this. So now I'll go to the C problem. No other doubt side for B. Okay, I don't see any doubts and no one found as well. So the third problem is make even. So you have an array of n integers, and in each move you can choose 2 integers, remove them from the array, and replace them with the absolute value of the difference. So in each move you will remove 2 elements and add 1 element. So the size of the array decreases by 1, and you are asked to do n minus 1 operations such that the array size becomes 1, and the challenge is, can you make an even number? So the nice thing to note in this question is, it doesn't matter what operations you do, the parity of the final number will remain the same. Because suppose you have a1, a2, a3. Now let's say I remove a1 and a2, so I'll replace them with mod a1 minus a2. let's say I've sorted this in descending order for convenience, just for the sake of seeing the elements nicely. And a1 minus a2, a3. Let's say this is also in descending order only. Now, which means I'll have to do mod a1 minus a2 minus a3. So if you've seen this final modulus, you can even try for bigger values of n as well. Each element will come exactly once. So in the initial array, all elements will come once and each element will come exactly once. And the nice thing about this sign is it could have been plus or it could have been minus. But the interesting thing is, irrespective of whether it's a plus and minus, even plus minus even is going to give you even, and odd plus minus odd is going to give you even. The only case where you do a plus, you add two numbers and you get an odd number is when you do even plus minus odd. Only this is going to give you odd, and the sign even doesn't matter. You can do even plus odd, even minus odd. Still, the parity of the final number remains the same. So if we go through all the elements here, maybe I have, let's say, alpha even numbers and I have n minus alpha odd numbers in the initial array. So if this is even, if the number of odd numbers is even, I can do odd plus odd, odd plus odd, odd plus odd, odd plus odd, and all of the odd numbers will become even. But then if I have odd number of odd numbers, I will have to do something like this once, and that will give me another odd number. So one odd number gives rise to one odd number, gives rise to one odd number, and the final array will also be odd. So if I had like 1, 3, 7, 2, 4, 2, 4, it will become 2, 1, 3, it will become 2, 2, 2, it will become 0, but then I'm left with 0 and 7. So the odd number will give me an issue. So the solution to this problem is, if you have even number of odd numbers, you can do what mantra says. You can make the final element to be even. But then if you have odd number of odd numbers, you will have to do this operation once, and that is giving you an odd number as the result. So if you have odd number of odd numbers, the final number is also going to be odd in the end. Even number of even numbers, so even number of odd numbers, yes. Odd number of odd numbers, no. 0 is also an even number, so even if you have all numbers to be even, then also you should print out S. Any doubts on problem C? Or you wrote some code and didn't pass? And for B and C, you can just use the regular integer variable. Constraints A goes from 1 to 10 power 9. So any doubts? No one has raised hand, and there's nothing in the chat as well. So I am assuming you guys got the solution. If I'm going a bit too fast as well, you can tell me. I'm just going fast so that we can complete more problems discussion. If you want me to slow down, or if you have any queries, do put it in the chat, or you can tell me, right? So this question, we need the gangster. So you are given two words, right? You're given two words. If the length of both words is different, you don't arrange a meeting with the boss. So if the words are of unequal length, you don't fix an appointment with the main boss. Or if the risk factor is more than 5, you don't fix an appointment. So what is the risk factor? Risk factor is the maximum number of indices where both the words differ. So for example, there's a word, they've given words principal and principal. So you have a dot and I. Now dot could have been any letter. Dot could have been an I, dot could have been a J, or it could have been anything. But then as I want to find the maximum risk factor, I will assume dot was not I, and I will say there is a difference. So P same, R same, dot and I different, N same, Cn dot different, In dot different, P and P same, L and A is different, E and L is different. So there were risk factor for this word is 5, and as it is not strictly more than 5, you can still arrange a meeting with the main boss. So one error I had seen in this problem was, what most of you did is, if the two characters are same, you didn't count it for risk factor, or if it is different, you counted it. So the contradictory example would be this, AE dot AE dot. So here, according to the code that many people wrote, if both the letters are the same, the risk factor, it won't be counted to risk factor. So according to that code, the risk factor for this code, for these two strings would be 0. But then you have a dot and dot here. Now this dot could have been an F, and this dot could have been a G. We don't know, because Vineet doesn't know, that's why he's put a dot. And as I want to find maximum risk factor, even if both of them are dots, I will go with the worst case assumption that both of them are different letters, and I will have to count that as well. So if both are dots, you'll have to count it in risk factor. Even if one is dot, you'll actually have to count it in risk factor. Or if both letters are given as alphabets and they're different, you have to count it in risk factor. So that was the error that many people had made in this question. So bottom line solution is, if either one of them is a dot, it will be counted in the risk factor. Or if both letters are proper alphabets and they're different, it will be counted in this factor. And before that, you have to check if both the strings are of different length as well. So if there's different length, you can directly, say, no, there won't be a meeting in the boss, and you don't even need to go check the letter differences as well. So any doubts here? I think here we had mentioned lowercase as well. So
Yeah, I have one doubt.
yeah, sure.
We have to check for the maximum case so that both dots could be different. If we have to check for the minimum, then we can assume that both dot
Then
can be
if,
same.
yeah, you can assume both can be same. Even if you have E and dot, you can say this is valid. Maybe this letter is E. So if you have a dot, you don't need to count it at all for minimum case. But then for maximum case, if you have a dot, you have to count it.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
So I guess that explains problem D. Any doubts in problem D? Or do you want me to explain again? Maybe I went too fast or slow. Okay, I don't see any raised hands. Nothing in the chat as well. Memes OP, thank you. So yeah, that's for D. Now let's go to E. So E had actually less number of solves. F had 67, E had 49. The issue that we had seen in E was many of you forgot to read this. Many of you forgot to read the question. We had said that the characters can be uppercase or lowercase, but many of you checked only lowercase characters. So that was one error in this problem. We'll go to the problem once. Abdullah thinks that vowels rarely occur next to each other in words, but Ayush thinks that's not the case. So he calls a word lovely if it has at least one pair of consecutive vowels. So the word food is lovely, but the word work is not. Nice, right? And then they'll give you n words, and they will ask you whether the occurrence of lovely words is common or rare. We have defined common or rare as well. An event is rare if it occurs in less than 20% of the words. If it occurs in greater than or equal to 20% of the words, it is common. In this example, Ayush, so AA, you guys should have taken the hint that capital and small are here. So there's AA here and double E here, and all other words, they don't have consecutive letters. So there are only 2 lovely words out of 15. So percentage occurrence is 2 by 15 times 100, which is less than 20%. So in this set of words, the occurrence of lovely words is rare. So what you have to do is each string you will check if it is lovely or not lovely. The condition for checking lovely is this character should be a vowel and the next character should be a vowel. So what you can do is for each character you can create an array and let the array be 1 if it is a vowel, and if it's not a vowel put 0, and then you go check vi and then in. So you iterate through the array and you check if the adjacent element is a vowel and this is also a vowel. So if both the letters are vowels, it is a lovely word. You can just say the word is lovely. You can increment in your lovely counter and you can stop iterating through this word. Or if you went through all pairs, you went through vi, in, ne, ee, et, and you didn't find consecutive vowels, then you can just say it's not a lovely word. So you don't need to increment this number of lovely words. And at the end, many of you had used 0.2 for comparison. There's a problem with using 0.2. If you give 0.2 to the computer will not store it like how we store. It won't store it as a decimal number, but rather it stores a kind of binary equivalent of decimals. And for 1 by 5, the binary equivalent need not be a finite one. So for like 1 by 3, the decimal expansion is not finite, so 0.33 so on. So like that, for binary number, when you express this number in binary, its expansion need not terminate, so it could be recurring. So in that case, we don't know how exactly double, whether it truncates or it rounds off. As we are not very aware of how that happens, you can just use regular integer division kind of thing. So if 5 into number of lovely words is less than the total number of words, you put rare or you put lovely. Again, you don't do n by 5. You don't do total number of words by 5, because that is again integer division. So 24 by 5, it should actually tell you 4.8, but your computer will tell you 4. So what you should do is, the actual strict condition would be if number of lovely words is, so this is the condition, right? Try to avoid division in C++. So this condition you can rewrite as n is equal to 5 into L. So try to use multiplication as much as you can. Try to avoid this, or even try to avoid 0.2 into n. even if you use float for n, l, and all the variables that you use, even if you use float or double, try to avoid this because of how this internally gets expressed. Try to avoid this because it's integer division. If wherever you have division, take LCM and multiply it on both sides. Do this, right? So I hope that provides you a method of how to solve this problem. I think the problem itself is straightforward. Just that the implementation could be tricky. You could miss out EE's, capital E, small e, things like this. And in this division thing, you could have made an issue. So is that clear for the E problem solution? Do you want me to repeat some part, or you wrote some code and you think that's right and that didn't pass? Any queries like that? Feel free to ask, even if you think it's a very noob query or something. So I don't see any issues here. So I see +1. Okay, coding right now, due to time constraints, we might not be able to show. What we will do is we will solve here itself and put it here. One thing that you can actually do is you can go and stalk other people's code. So you can go here and you can see their codes as well, what mistakes they made. We have made everything public. So maybe there's a wrong answer. You can see why that's a wrong answer as well. So you can even try to debug others' codes. You can do that, but what we will do is we will upload solutions from our side as well. You, as we are managers, you'll probably be able to see it on the top when we submit. So you can see that, and we'll also upload a tutorial page or some kind of link page where you can find the links to solutions. We'll do that by end of today, right? So if we don't do that, remind it to us. Yeah, AE will count as lovely because you have A and E together. Yeah, AE is lovely. The two vowels need not be the same vowels. Okay, Ayush, yeah, but yeah, two vowels need not be same. So please, the word please is also a lovely word, right? So I guess that doubt's clear. And I guess now you also saw what kind of errors you can make in problems and how you can debug them, right? So reading the problem statement is very important, especially stuff like this that we sometimes put in brackets so that you guys don't read. So ensure that you read all these things properly when you solve problems. So I guess that's it for queries for this problem. I'll move on to the next problem. Cool font. So I hope no one from Shastra reads this problem, or else Swayamka will be disbanded for writing this. So we are given a brochure and you just want to steal letters from another magazine. So you cut out words from a magazine and you want to see, using those words, letters, how many Shastras I can form, right? So what I will do, I will get input of the words, and if the letter is S or H or A or T, I will create a counter for the number of S's I have, number of H's I have, number of A's I have, and number of T's I have. Whenever in the word I find S, if I find an S, I will increment my number of S by 1. If I find a H, I will increment. E is useless for Shastra. P is also useless for Shastra. But then R is useful. So I will just keep incrementing whenever I find these letters. A simple brute force solution. If the character, I'll take the input of the string. If the character is an S, I will increment my S counter. If it is a H, I will increment my H counter. If it is an A, I will increment my A counter. If it is a T or an R, similarly, I will increment the A or R counter. And then once I increment, for forming one word Shastra, I need two S's. So if I just go with the number of S's, the number of S's I will require, number of Shastras I can form just with S's will be S by 2, because each word requires two S's. For H it will be H by 1, right? SHAA, STRA. For A it will be 4, and for R it's going to be 1, I guess. Shastra. And T is going to be 1. So if I just go on SS, this is the number of Shastras I can form. H, this is the number of Shastras I can form. This is the number of Shastras. So I'll take min of all these numbers, because I need all of these to be satisfied. And I need to do integer division here, obviously, float. I can't form half Shastra. So yeah, each string I get input. If it is one of the characters that I want, I will create a S counter, a H counter, a T counter. I'll create a counter for each letter. And or you can even create a counter for all letters, and you could do C of so I could create a counter for all of the letters. I could create a counter C of 26, and I can do C of whatever character that is. So let's say S of I minus A plus plus. So whenever the S comes, what is the position of S in the alphabet? P is 16, 17, 18, 19, P, Q, R, S. 16, 17, 18, 19. So as I'm doing indexing from 0, S will correspond to 18. So when I do as S minus A, it will give me 18. So whenever I see S, C of 18 will be incremented. Whenever I see A, C of 0 will be incremented, because when you do C of S of I minus A plus plus, this single statement will increment whatever character comes, that corresponding character's counter will be incremented. So this is a nice way of counting the frequency of each character over all these strings. So you could do this, or you can just check for these 5 letters as well. Either one works. So you take input as a string, go through the string. If the characters that you want is there, you count them. Else you just skip that letter and you move on to the next letter. And finally you write this min condition. And in this problem, I don't think there are any traps or border cases. So yeah. Any doubts? So okay, haha, A of he may have shared circles. Yeah.
Yeah, one doubt. For counting thing, we can use one loop inside the other one for that letter and another loop for that words, right? Is
Meaning,
there any
so,
problem with the
will
time
you-
complexity thing?
So are you doing? I will take the string. I will count number of times S comes in it. I will count number of times H comes in it. So for each letter you will run one loop. Are you doing that?
In each test case, like we have certain number of words, right?
Yeah, we have 5 words.
And for each words, we have to use that to check that for each letter inside
yeah,
that
in each
word.
word you have to check each letter. Yeah.
So for that two things that we have to do like one loop inside the other, one for the words and other for
one for the number. So basically you'll be doing so if I give you number of words,
yeah,
and then you'll maybe declare a string here,
yeah.
string S, let's say, and then you'll go to the size,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, is there any problem with the time complexity?
No, there won't be a
in
time
this?
complexity issue. Reason is the total time that these two loops will take is, it will be the sum of the lengths of strings, right? Because each string I'm going once, one time this loop will think, and this is the number of strings. So the sum of the lengths of the strings will be the time complexity of this code. And I think we have given sum of size of words over all test cases less than 10 × 6. So the total time that these two loops should together take should be less than 10 × 6 iterations. And that's like 10 milliseconds. So we have given 2 seconds time as well. So there won't be any time issue there. Did you face any time issue?
No, because not in particular this question, I didn't get time to solve to this that question, but in many of the other questions, like when I use like two loops, one inside other, then I got time.
So there maybe it could be like here you'd have used n and here you'd have used n again, and then the constraint would have been n goes from 1 to 10 × 5. So in that case, you're writing O of n square, right? So for each n, O of n square would be 10 × 10. So 10 × 10 won't pass. Only 10 × 8 or 10 × 9 passes. 10 × 9 is SOSAS. So okay, Sapnesh, is it fine if I take 2 or 3 more minutes? I'll discuss G problem as well.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So G will be the last that I'll be discussing. Others, I guess, there are a bit less solves, and there are no solves in the contest. But after the contest, I saw many of you started solving it. So for those, we will. I'll just provide written solutions. The problem setters will provide written solutions. So this problem is just this: you have a 2D matrix, and it's a character. You can declare it as a character array, car a of x comma m comma n or something, n comma m, I think. And there's a diamond in some position. So what you can do is you can find the position of the diamond by iterating through the whole matrix once, right? So you will go through each element of the matrix, and if it's a diamond, I will store the x coordinate of the diamond and y coordinate of the diamond, right? And there's only one diamond in the whole thing, so I will only have one thing. And then once I have stored the diamond, I can again go through the matrix and I can find the distance between this point and this point, right? So distance, the way we have defined a move is we can either move left, right, up or down. So suppose you have 2 points x comma y and a comma b. Suppose you have 2 points x comma y and a comma b. The distance between these 2 points would be the absolute value of x minus a plus absolute value of y minus b. So this would be the minimum moves that he would take to go from x comma y to a comma b. So what I can do is, now that I've stored where the diamond is, I will go through the whole matrix and then I will see, okay, is it an entry point? If it is an entry point, I will find its distance from the diamond using this. So let's say a comma b is a position of a diamond and you're iterating through xy. So you can find the distance of the diamond from this entry point, and that will be the number of moves he has to make. And I will maybe, I'll store d as this. So, and then I'll have to minimize d over all iterations, right? So I can do this. Initially, I can give d to be some huge value. So, and we know there's at least one entry point and there's at least one diamond. So d will get changed at some point in time. So I'll give d some huge value. And then if I see an entry point, I will change d to min of existing distance that I have found, or the distance by moving from this entry point to the diamond. So I will iterate through the whole matrix once. If it's an entry point, I will find its distance from d. And if that's the minimum value, I'll store it as the minimum value. D will store the minimum value. By the time I go through the whole matrix, I would have gone through all possible entry points. So I'll be storing the minimum number of moves required from some entry point to reach the diamond. And that is what we have to output anyways. So it's just you have to brute force through all points in the matrix. If there's an entry, you find minimum distance, and that's all. And the nice thing is you'll have to find d before itself. You can't, every time you find an entry point, you can't go and search where the diamond is. You have to find it at the first itself. And then once I know where the diamond is, I will check through all entry points and find the distance to the diamond. So solution would be O of nm, because I'm going through the matrix once to find the diamond and once to iterate through all entry points. So order of nm. Any doubts there? Yeah, Tahir solved it after the contest. So maybe in the next contest, the last problem will be, can you solve it after Tahir? No, can you solve it before Tahir? After Tahir, anyone can solve. So I guess there's no doubts on this problem, right? If you have doubts or you're not able to access chat means, you can raise hand. So you just have to iterate through the museum, and if there are entry points, find its distance from the diamond. So yeah, I guess that's it for the discussion. I'll hand over to Saptarshi. If you have any more doubts or queries, you can again ask your coordinators in the group if you don't want to ask now. We'll also provide the solution codes in case you want to compare our code and your code. Right? So I'll stop sharing. Saptarshi, you can take over.
Yeah,
I'll
Chatur,
be
please.
taking over.
Yeah.
Okay, Chatur starts here, fine.
I'm sharing my camera. I hope you guys can see me, and I'll be sharing my screen in a second. Could you just confirm whether you guys can see my screen and camera?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So hi guys. So today we'll be majorly explaining three topics: recursion, GCD, and binary search, and essentially their utilization in CP. So I'd be going ahead and starting with recursion. Okay, so recursion. So the process of recursion is basically a function which calls itself repeatedly, so that we can solve some specific type of questions. So a very famous example of recursion is finding the factorial number. So let's say I'll start off with explaining how the function works itself. So let's say we have a function called n factorial, which takes integer value. So if n is equal to 1, it returns 1, or else it returns n into factorial of n minus 1. So what this does is, let's say I take an example of n is equal to 6. So I try to find, let's say I call fact of 6. So first thing it checks is if n is equal to 1, it returns 1, n is not equal to 1, so it goes on to the else thing and returns n into factorial of 5. So what this does is it calls factorial 5 again. So factorial 5 we run separately, and then it itself eventually calls 5 into factorial of 4. So now the effective value, the initial factorial fact 6 returning is 5 into 4 into factorial of 6 into 5 into factorial of 4. And this process repeats in a repetitive manner until we go on when n becomes 1, and then it returns 1, which gives us 6 into 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. As I've shown here, just another example where factorial 5 is equal to 5 into factorial 4, which becomes 5 into 4 factorial 3, and so on. So this is a pretty simple utilization of recursion in a question. Now the recursion does take a lot of time, so it's not highly used in CP, but there's it's a modification to recursion which makes the time lesser and you can solve it faster. So I'll be going on to explain another common utilization of recursion. It's called Fibonacci series, which most people would be knowing over here. So basically, what the sequence is each element would be the sum of the previous two elements in the series. So if you take this case here, 5 is the sum of 2 plus 3. Then we go to the next one, 8 is 5 plus 3, and so on. So basically, in simple terms, we can write that we write fib of n saying it's pointing to the nth element of the series. Fib of n is equal to fib of n minus 1 plus fib of n minus 2. Now, as you guys can see here, similar to the previous question, we can also use recursion to simplify a process of solving rather than trying to find it in a different manner. So I'll be this is the generic function which I've named fib, which takes a integer n to tell the nth term of the Fibonacci series. So similarly here, if n is equal to 1, it returns 0, which is the first element of Fibonacci series, which is already defined. And if n is equal to 2, it returns 1. Because we will be needing the first two elements to start off from the third element, saying that the third element is the sum of first two, and fourth is 3 plus 2, and so on. So now, if n is not equal to 1 or 2, it simply returns fib of n minus 1 plus fib of n minus 2, which will in return call fib of n minus 1 and fib of n minus 2 and solve them separately. So I've also showed an example of how, say, fib of 6 is calculated. So now when you run fib of 6, it returns fib of 5 plus fib of 4. So now it separately runs fib of 5 and separately runs fib of 4. So fib of 5 again does the same process as previously, which calls fib of 4 plus fib of 3, n minus 1 plus n minus 2. Now fib of 4 again calls fib of 3 and 2, and 3 calls 2 and 1. 2 and 1 don't really need to call anything else because when it's 1 or 2, it returns the value 0 or 1. So as you guys can see here, this main function calls these two, and this follows on to call fib4 again, and here also fib4 is called. Now it's just a repetition of the same function so that we can eventually find a value. But at the same time, you guys can also see here that the same function is being called many times. Like we're calculating fib4 and we're calculating fib4 again. We're calculating fib3 thrice. So it's as you can see, it's kind of a time inefficient process. As say, if you want to find the Fibonacci term of, let's say, a very huge value, let's say 1000, it would need to call lesser values a lot of times. So it is kind of inefficient, but there will be an explanation of how to make it more efficient in terms of solving. Now, GCD. Now, GCD can be found by using recursion itself, but before we go to using recursion, this is the most commonly used function in CP. It is basically two underscores GCD a comma b. Do remember that there are two underscores here. I have made the mistake of forgetting it myself sometimes. So it's basically you just write, let's say, int g is equal to GCD of a comma b. It just prints the GCD of a comma b, and this is much more used than creating a GCD function on its own and then using it to solve most of our problems. So now I'll get to the actual recursion process of GCD. So in recursion way of GCD, we can shorten our process of finding GCD of two bigger numbers to equate it to a GCD of two smaller numbers. So we use something called the Euclidean algorithm. It uses principle such that GCD of a comma b is equal to GCD of a comma a percentage b, meaning the remainder of a when divided by b, where a and b are positive integers. Now I'll be explaining how this is true in the next page. So using this property, let's say we have GCD of, say, 17 and 8. So we can write as similarly GCD of 17 comma 17 percentage 8. That is basically 1. So that equal to GCD of 17 comma 1. So now we know GCD of 17 comma 1 is pretty simple, which is 1. So we have effectively taken higher values and brought them to lower values to make our solving process simple. So using this property, you can just keep calling the function again and again as we've seen before until we get the values, let's say GCD of x comma 0 or GCD of 0 comma x or GCD of x comma 1 or GCD of 1 comma x. So if you obtain GCD of x comma 0 or GCD of 0 comma x in any of the eventually in the process, all we have to write is that it's equal to x, because we know 0 is divisible by any number, and the highest number which divides x is x itself. So x divides x and x divides 0 as well. So the GCD of x comma 0 or 0 comma x is x itself. So now I'll be telling you the proof of why GCD of a comma b is equal to GCD of a comma percentage b. So now I will take without loss of generosity, I'll just take that a is greater than b for my simplicity. So now I will be writing a is equal to b into q plus r in a simple a is divided by b to form a quotient plus a remainder process where all the values are non-negative integers. So now I will take any integer which is a common divisor of a comma b. It can be anything, any of the common divisor of a comma b. It can just be that there's only one common divisor and it's 1. So from that we know that x divides a and x divides b. So as x divides a and x divides b, it is quite obvious that x will divide any linear combination of a and b. So I will specifically choose a condition where we are taking a linear combination as a minus b of q. So from this we can say x divides a minus b of q, which is basically saying that x divides r. So from this one line here we can tell if we have any number which is the common divisor of a comma b, meaning it divides both a and b, it will divide r as well. So as it divides r, x is a common divisor of a and b, then it will also be a common divisor of b and r because it does divide b and r together. Similarly, in the same way, instead of a and b, I'll be choosing b and r. So let's say I'll take another y for example here. This is a common divisor of b and r. So if y divides b, y divides r, it will obviously divide a linear combination of b and r. So y divides b into q plus r. B into q plus r is basically a. So now we know if y divides b and y divides a, then it will divide, y divides b and y divides r, then it will divide a. So now from these two statements, I can conclude that essentially, if d is a common divisor of a and b, then d is also a common divisor of b and r, and the converse as well, meaning if d is a common divisor of b and r, then it is a common divisor of a and b as well. So now if you take a d as a set, meaning take a set of all the common divisors of a and b and r, we know they're equal sets, meaning they have the same values in them because any divisor here will also be divisor there. So in any finite set, there'll be a greatest element, and we know both the sets are equal. So the greatest common divisor of a and b will be equal to the greatest common divisor of b and r, which is basically the very statement which I proved here. GCD of a comma b is equal to GCD of a comma a percentage b. So this is the generic proof of GCD of a comma b is equal to GCD of a comma a percentage b. I'll first check if there are any doubts with them. If anybody has doubts, just please do raise your hand or ask in chat, because this is the algorithms of taking, which could have probably caused doubts. Yeah, it seems fine so far. If you have any doubt in the middle as well, do feel free to ask. And I will be showing a basic function which will be using GCD via recursion. So similarly here I'll take GCD, let's say int a comma b. Now we take the case where if either of them is 0, then we just have to return the other element, because GCD of 0 comma some other value is always the other value itself. So if a is equal to 0, return b, or else if b is equal to 0, we return a. Now if neither is 0, we have to simplify the process. So where we just return else GCD of a comma a percentage b. So this is the way we can use recursion to solve and find GCD in our programs. So I hope you have understood this, the basic explanation of recursion and GCD necessary for CP. So now as I've explained what recursion and GCD are, I will be taking a few questions on GCD to show you how GCD is usually used in computer programming. So this is a question on CodeChef. CodeChef is pretty simple, similar platform as Codeforces. It's just a little bit user-friendly, nothing more. So this is a question called subarray GCD. I read the question now. Given an array A1 so on till AN, you have to print the size of the largest contiguous subarray such that the GCD of all integers in the subarray is 1. Formally, for a subarray A of I plus 1 so on till A of j to be valid, GCD of all these numbers should be 1. So if no valid subarray exists, output -1. Input test cases and this. Okay. So now in this question, there's a small trick with this question. So we don't necessarily have to read each subarray and check if the GCD is 1. So now
Chaturvedi, you can
yeah?
just wait for a minute to people to read the question because they haven't
okay.
seen this problem before.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
I'll just wait for a minute so we can just get used to the question. In essence, we're just calculating the largest subarray which will have the GCD of all elements equal to 1. If we are given an array of n values. Could you zoom it? Okay. Is this fine? Yep. I hope everyone has had the question so far. So I'll be explaining how to essentially solve the question. So there's a small trick to the question. So now let's say we have n integers, let's say a1, a2, so on till an. So now we just have to find the largest subarray where the GCD of all elements is 1. So now what we do is, let's say we have these many elements right now. Let's take any two elements a of I and a of j. So now what we can tell is, if the GCD of a of I comma a of j is 1, if the GCD of these two, sorry for the bad writing, if the GCD of a of I comma a of j is 1, then we can take the GCD of all the elements will also be 1. In more simple case, I'll take a smaller example. Let's say we take GCD of A1, A2, A3. So this is nothing but equivalent to GCD of A1, comma GCD of A2, comma A3. Again, I'm sorry for the writing. Yeah. So now if the GCD of A1, comma A2, comma A3 is equal to this thing, so we know if these two elements have the GCD of 1, let's say. Let's take the example where they are the GCD of, if this GCD is 1. So we know GCD of any element, any positive integer greater than 1, comma 1 is 1. Because the only integer less than or equal to 1 is divides 1 is 1. Meaning GCD of n, comma 1 is always 1, no matter what the value of n is. So similarly here, if we have any two elements where the GCD is 1, that means the whole array, the GCD would also be 1 in a simple case. Meaning the question here, there are only two possible outcomes. One is we take all the elements and we still don't find the GCD equal to 1, or that will give the output as -1, or the entire array will have the GCD of 1, which gives the answer as the total number of elements as the maximum subarray. I will repeat it again to clarify it more specifically. There are essentially only two answers because of this thing which we just found here. Meaning, let's say if any two elements have the GCD equal to 1, the whole array would be 1. So the maximum subarray of the such that with the GCD of all the elements is 1 would be the total array itself. But if you don't have any of these cases, meaning every element has a common factor, a common base which is not equal to 1, then and only then we will have a case where we can't find a subarray where we'll have the GCD of all the values equal to 1. So simply we don't really need to find each subarray and check if there's a GCD possible where the GCD is 1. We just have to find the whole GCD of the whole array, because if the GCD of the whole array is 1, then the answer we need is 1. The maximum subarray is of n elements. But on the other hand, if the total GCD of the whole array is not 1, that means we cannot choose any subarray such that we will have the GCD of the values of subarray equal to 1. I hope I made the explanation quite clear. If anybody has any doubts, please do ask. Okay, I'm bad about that. So does anybody have any doubts with the logic of this question?
No, if GCD of any of the array is not equal to 1, then we should output only 1, right?
I will be outputting -1 because that's what they have asked in the question. They said if you don't have any valid subarray, then we output -1.
If there exists at least one, then we'll print the whole size of the array.
Yes.
Okay.
I would be telling it again just in case. Basically, if we have GCD of any two elements equal to 1, that means the whole array will also have the GCD equal to 1. That means all we have to find is, instead of searching each subarray necessarily, we take the GCD of all the elements directly itself, and then what we do is we check whether the total GCD is 1 or some other value which is greater than 1. If it is 1, that means the maximum subarray needed is the total n elements itself. But if the GCD of all the elements is not 1, that means it is not possible to find a subarray in this such that we'll have GCD equal to 1. I hope I'm clear with this. If any doubt, please raise your hand in the middle and or ask in chat. Seems fine for now. So I will go on to the coding part of the thing. There are test cases too. Okay. So we take the number of possible inputs and make an array to store all these values. Int of an. So for now, I've just inputted every single value there is. So I'll make an int GCD, which is just an integer for finding the total GCD of all the elements there is. And I will initialize GCD equal to a of 0, let's say. And for I equal to 1, comma I less than n, comma I plus plus. Now I just need to find the total GCD of every single of all the elements in the array. So as I've initiated GCD of is as a of 0, meaning the very first element. So I'll just each time I'll just make alteration to GCD, writing it as GCD is equal to. I probably have to take other value or confuse. Just take capital G will be the GCD of all the values in the thing, equal to. So what this statement does is, let's say we start off with GCD is a of 0. When the iteration is 1, it compares it to the a of 1, and then we take the GCD of those elements and so store it in G. And then we go for I is equal to 2, we create like G is equal to GCD of G comma a of 2, which is also equivalent to GCD of a of 0 comma a of 1 comma a of 2. So we keep repeating this process so that we in the ending we'll have G as the GCD of every single element in the array. So now, if G is equal to 1, that means the array has the maximum subarray which we can find with GCD equal to 1 is n itself. So all we have to do is cout n, and then now if GCD is not equal to and we found some other value, that means we can't create any subarray where we will have the GCD equal to 1. Else we just see out -1.
Hello.
Yeah.
I have a small doubt. Then why did you use the underscores after GCDs?
1 second. Is it this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just a function. I think I've mentioned in a second. This function has to be written with 2 underscores before. Like this function, what it does is we write, let's say, we write any value equal to underscore GCD of say a comma b. This is a function which does the job of finding GCD of a comma b. Like we don't need to use recursion or any other process which I've explained. This is just an easy function so that which will find the GCD of a comma b. This is just like a syntax, nothing more. The underscore is just a syntax.
So we have not defined GCD by user function, but if we use double underscore, then it will get GCD.
Yeah, this underscore GCD is just a function which is there in library which you can use to find GCD of other values. You don't need you don't need a function every single time to like create this. It's on this is much faster.
Okay.
Yeah, this should be able to run this and test check the test code is here. So the output 2 and -1. So I'll try submitting this. Okay, it will log in. I'll stop sharing my screen for a second and just log in and come back 1 second. Okay, wait, I'll explain the output. Yeah, Anshuman Pandey, you can ask your question now.
In the code, you have written for I equal to 0, but we didn't define I is int like anywhere previously.
Oh no, I've defined it previously.
Achha, oh.
Thank you though for the checking thing. So 1 second, I will just log into CodeChef and then come back. I think I'll start presenting again. Hope everyone can see my screen. This will take a moment. Usually in CodeChef. Yeah, that's correct answer. Okay, so this is. Can I just confirm with somebody if you guys can see my screen? I'm not really sure. It just shows presenting, but I'm not sure if it's hard or not.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll be done with this. Okay, I'll go with this. Okay, this is another question called GC operation, which is also pretty similar. So I'll go over the question first. Consider a sequence A of A1, A2, so on till AN, where initially A of I is equal to I for each valid I. So you may perform any number of operations in subsequence. In one operation, you can choose any two indices, and then calculate the greatest common divisor of A of I, comma A of j, and then interchange both A of I and A of j with G. I'm sorry for disturbing. Then we eventually get a sequence B of 1, B of 2, and so on till B of n. So is it possible to change this sequence A into B? Meaning they'll give the values of B, and you have to check whether you can convert A into the sequence B. So for example, I'll just give you guys a second to read this, just to clear it up. I hope everything is clear with this. So we just have to output yes if it's possible, no if it's not possible. So how the input works is just have n, which represents the number of values, and also the array A where you have 1, 2, 3 for this case, and an array B where you have the values 1, 2, 3 specifically. Like 1, 2, and 2, which is like, and we have to check whether the array A can be converted to array B by using the operation which is mentioned above. We just take two values and find the greatest common divisor of it. So now I'll give you the logic of this one. Yeah. So now let's say we have, after simplifying, we have gotten B1, B2, B3, so on till Bn. Yep. So now we can tell that if we have eventually gotten the sequence, that means B1 would have probably been any GCD combinations of A1 and any other elements, whatever it is. Or similarly for, let's say, BI would have been a GCD combination of AI and any other possible elements there is. That basically meaning I and any other elements. That means now we know that a GCD of I and any other elements will obviously divide I. I think that's self-explanatory. So a GCD, meaning the BI which you obtained here, will have to divide I. That is the necessary case of the GCD being present here. So if B of I can divide I, then that means and for each and every B of I present, that means this possible cases we can form this sequence of B from 1 to so on till n. I hope you guys have got the logic. If anybody has a doubt, please do raise your hand or ask in the chat. Okay, let us repeat it just in case. So we have any B of I. So if the B of I is valid to be in that position, that means it should be the GCD of A of I and other elements, meaning the GCD of I and other set of elements. That means B of I must be dividing I, and that should be true for every single B of n which exists. So this is the question, and I'll be writing the code part of it. Okay, I'll not change it from here because we're just inputting on the sequence anyway. So we just take int n, scene n, A of n. I'm just taking A because this is the array B we're inputting, so I'll just change it just for more clarification. Okay, so we've inputted the array B. So now we have to check whether at each point, like but every point, B of I should be able to divide I perfectly. So for that, I will create another integer called check, which shall be initializing a 1, and then using it to confirm whether it's divides if B of I divides every single element. So I'll put B of I is equal to 0, comma. Now if now I have to take I plus 1 for each thing because I started with I is equal to 0 and I'm checking B of I, meaning B of I actually stores the value in the I plus 1 element, sorry, I minus 1 place. So instead of writing if I is divisible by B, I should write I plus 1 is divisible by B. So now if this condition is false, that means we can tell that the effect of B is not possible from this statement. Yeah, if B of I plus 1 is not equal to 0, that means I can just make check is equal to 0 and then break the function. So what the reason I've used check here is basically it iterates over the array and then checks each element. But the moment any element doesn't satisfy the condition which you have found in the algorithm, we create check is equal to 0 and break the function. And in the ending, we just create if else case where we say out the output based on check. So if check is equal to 0, that means B of I is not possible, then we have to see out no. See out. And run this program once. So no and a yes. No and a yes. Perfect. So I'll submit it. Just take a second. Does anybody have any doubts with regarding this question? Just ask in chat or raise your hand. Any doubts with that? Yep, it's done. Okay, so these were the two questions in GCD. I hope you've understood everything which I've explained in recursion and GCD. If are there any doubts with respect to my explanation or the questions, you can go ahead and ask them. You can even ask a bit later. If there are no more questions, I'll be handing it over to Saptarshi to continue on with the explanation of binary search and a little bit more on recursion by himself. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Aditya, am I visible?
Your video hasn't come yet. It's just showing a black screen for me.
Oh, is it? I can
see you.
I can
Oh,
see.
okay.
Okay.
Submission message.
Okay. Yeah. And my screen visible?
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
both are
visible.
visible now.
Yeah. Okay. Before I go to binary search, let me go to the recursion part. Like Chaturvedi had said that the Fibonacci thing is not very quite efficient because the time complexity is very high. Because what is the thing is that suppose we need to find fib of 6, then it will do, what will it do? It will first call fib of 5 and fib of 4. Then what will 5 call? 5 will call 4 and 3. So we can see here that when we are calling 5 and then we are calling 4, after we are done with this entire 5, we are again calling 4. But the thing is that we have already calculated fib of 4 here. So we are again calling fib of 4, just so that's a waste of time, right? So we can make it efficient. It's not very efficient. The time complexity of this current recursive algorithm is 2 to the power n, big of 2 to the power n. Why? Because every time we are splitting the number into two parts, like n of n is splitting into n minus 1 and n minus 2, and irrespective of that, whether we have calculated or not, the function is calling itself again and again, right? Because if we are calling 4, we have calculated 4, but here again we are calling 4. We are not seeing that whether it is already being calculated or not. So a better approach to this is like storing the all the Fibonacci numbers somewhere in an array, possibly, and then after that, whenever someone asks to output the nth Fibonacci number, we can just output fib of n. So how to do that? Let's see. I'm declaring a global variable, a global array, so fib of say a very large number, say 10 raised to the power 6. And I'm declaring a function, say implements, where I'm implementing the Fibonacci array. So what will I'll write in implement function? I'll write that the base case fib of 0 equals to 0 and fib of 1 equals 1. And then I'm running a for loop from I equals to 2, I less than 10 to the power 6, I plus plus, of I equals to fib of I minus 1 plus fib of I minus 2. Right, so this is the function where I'm manually writing the base cases, and from from I equals to 2 to 10 to the power 6, I'm storing the values Fibonacci numbers in the array. And here I can just call the function implement. In the main function, I'm calling the function implement. When I call the function implement, all the numbers from 0 to 10 to the power 6 are stored in the array. And when in the solve function, I can just write, suppose I want to find the first 25 Fibonacci numbers, I can just run a for loop. Output fib of 5. Let's run this. Yeah, so here we got the first 25 Fibonacci numbers like at once. So whenever any number you want, suppose someone wants, suppose you are inputting a number and just output fib, just because it is already stored in the array, right? So you can access it anytime you want. So this is approach using big O of n, and the previous approach using this recursive function is O of 2 to the power n. So what is the difference? Like we can very much see the difference. Like suppose you want to find the 1000 Fibonacci number. So if you want the 1000 Fibonacci number and you trying to calculate it using this recursive approach, the time complexity is 2 to the power n. So it will take, worst case is it will take 2 to the power 1000 operations. So it's very huge. Like it's approximately like 10 to the power 300. We know that the compilers can in 1 second we can only perform like 10 to the power 8 operations, and here it is 10 to the power 300 operations. Like it's really huge. Like it will take years, 100, even more than 100 years. So but when if you do in O of n, it will just take 100 operations. Like O of n, so n is 1000, so it will take only 1000 operations. So you can very well see the difference like between 10 to the power 300 operations and only 1000 operations in O of n, and 10 to the power 300 in O of 2 to the power n. So this is a better implementation, much better implementation to be precise, than the recursive function. So anybody has a doubt in this before I proceed to binary search? The storing in the array. Okay, so no one has doubt. So I'll proceed to binary search.
Saptarshi, the login thing.
Login
Do I give?
Okay. Do you want to give right now, or you will give after the end of the session?
Shall I just give them like a small hint to it so that they can maybe think over these 2-3 days?
Okay, you can. Okay, you can give at the end of the session, or do you want to give?
Yeah. Okay, I'll give it at the end of the session. Cool.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's learn about binary search. Binary search is a special a kind of searching algorithm where we can find the element. It works in a sorted array, obviously. We can find an element in a sorted array by dividing the search into half. So what actually happens is, like we are given an array, we want to find an element in the array. So we will search for the middle element. The array is sorted. We will check the middlemost element and compare it with the search element, the element which we want to search. So if the middle element is less than the search element, then that means the search element is more. That means it will lie somewhere in the right half of the array. So, and we can conclude that the search element cannot lie in the left half of the array because the array is sorted. So then we can just divide the array into two halves, and we apply the same function in the right side of the array. Or else, if the search element is less than the middlemost element, then we apply the same function on the leftmost part of the element. And we repeat this process till we converge to only a single element, and then the effective search interval becomes 0. So this is an example of binary search program. This is the main code of binary search. We will, any time when we use binary search in competitive programming, the code more or less looks like the same. Suppose there is an array, this is a predefined element and a predefined array, and there is a search element which we want to find, and then we call the binary search of array and the size and search element, and we call it to be the position. We want to find the position where the current element lies. So this is the binary search function. What we define two extreme positions, L equals to 0, left pointer and right pointer. They are the extrememost position, 0 being the leftmost, n minus 1 being the rightmost, because the arrays are 0 and text, we know that. So while L is less than R, what we do, we define M to be the average index of the positions of L and R, which is L plus R by 2. And if a search element X matches exactly with the array element, then I return the index. Else, if the search element is less than the array element, then the rightmost element, then what I do, I shift the right element to one position to the left of the middlemost element. Right, because the middlemost element is greater than X, that means X must lie to the left half of the array. So now I will search L pointer, I will keep as it is, while the R pointer I will shift one position left to the middlemost element, so that I can next time I can search in the left half of the array. Or else if X is greater than the middlemost element, then I need to search in the rightmost half of the array. Then I will shift the left pointer to one place to the right of the middlemost element. I continue like that until L is less than R. That means L does not process R at any point. Or else if I didn't find any position, I return -1. So this has some constraint. This code has some constraints. Like this assumes that all the elements of the array has to be like distinct. So what if all the elements are may not be distinct? Then what we can do that. Then we need to be like precise about that, whether we want to find the minimum index of the element or we need to find the maximum possible index of the array. So depending on that, we need to remove this part of the code. This X equals to array of M. Like if even if it is equal to the middlemost element, we need to still continue checking because it may not be the only possible. It may not be the only possible element. Like there can be more than one appearance of array of M. Like X, there can be more than one X appearing. So if we want to find the lowermost element, lowest index of X, then I need to again search in the left half of the array. And if I need to search in the I need to find the highest index of X, then I need to again search in the right half of the array. So I put equal to in else if part or else part accordingly. But this part of the code is removed for distinct numbers. So anybody has doubt in the binary search code part till now?
If you remove the first part, then we'll obviously get return -1.
Sorry?
If you remove the first part, if it is equal to array of M, we return M plus 1. But if you remove that, we'll eventually return -1.
No, I am not. Yes. I am not making this. I am not removing this. I am making equal to also in place of here. Like I will make this less than or equal to. I am understanding. I am making this less than or equal to. Like even if it is equal, I will still search in the right half of the array. If I want the highest index of the X, or if I want the lowest index of the X, I will search in the left half of the array. I will make it not strictly less. I will make it less than or equal to. You get it? Okay, fine. Okay, so the time complexity of binary search is 2 log of n in the base of 2. Why? Because if we have an array, we have an L pointer, we have an R pointer. What we do is search the middlemost element, we compare it with the search element, and if it is less, then if the middle element is less, then we need to search in the right half array. If it is more, I need to search in the left half of the array. So every time what happens is that we are dividing the array into two parts. Like if we search here, then again I will go in the middlemost element. Then I can go here, again middlemost element, again go here, again middlemost element. So like that, I'm dividing the array into two parts every time. So the number of times, suppose the array size is n, each time after one operation the array size reduces to half. So after k operations, the array size reduces by 2 to the power k, and we will continue until we reach converge to 1 point. So it will be around 1. So n by 2 to the power k will be 1. So 2 to the power k equals to n, and hence we can, k is the number of operations, and hence we can find k to be log of n in the base 2. So this is the worst case time complexity of binary search. So we can see that it is really efficient, because even if we say n is 10 to the power 18, so log of 10 to the power 18 in the base 2 will be around just around 60 operations. Like in 1 second, we know that we can do 10 to the power 8 operations, but we are doing just 60 operations. So it will not it'll take just a millisecond, not even a millisecond to complete this entire binary search. So we can just see how efficient this code is. Okay, so anybody has doubt? Let me just check once again, or else I will proceed to the problems. Okay. Okay, so let us proceed to problem solving on binary search. This is a problem. Interesting thing. I want you all to read this problem once. I'll give you 1 minute and then I'll explain the problem and the code. Okay, I hope you all have read the problem. If you haven't, like, I'll just try to send the question to the chat. You guys can access it if you want. I'll explain the problem now. It says Vasily likes to rest after hard work, so you may often meet him at some bar nearby. As all programmers do, he loves the favorite drink B Cola, which can be bought in n different shops in the city. It's known that the price of one bottle in the shop I is equal to XI coins. Vasily plans to buy his favorite drink for Q consecutive days, and for each day he has MI coins. Now, for each of the days, he wants to know in how many different shops he can buy a bottle of B Cola. Okay, so you are given an n number of shops and then XI, then the prices in the ith shop, then your Q, given Q, number of days he wants to drink, and M of I, like number of coins he has in each day. So let's take this example, 3, 10, 8, 6, 11. Just a second. We know that the binary search works in a sorted array. So we will first sort the array. We'll write 3, 6, 8, 10, and 11. So, and now, like, these are the prices in the shops, prices of the drink in each of the shop. And then you are given Q, which is 4 number of days. At each of the days, he has this many coins. Like the first day he has 1 coin, second day he has 10 coins, third day has only 3 coins, fourth day has 11 coins. So on each day you have to output from how many shops can he buy. So let's take the example, like when he has, in the first day he has only 1 coin. So with 1 coin, he cannot buy a drink from any of the shops. Like for all the shops, the prices of one bottle is like more than 1. So he can't buy from any shop. So the answer is 0. For the second day, there are 10. He has 10 coins. So from 10 coins, from how many shops he can buy? He can buy from 3. He can buy for 6. He can buy 8. He can buy 10 also. He cannot buy 11. Why? Because 10 is less than 11. So this is for the second day. For third day, he has 3 coins. He can only buy one this coin this from this shop. He cannot buy from any other shop. And from fourth day, it's 11. So he can buy from all the shops. So the answer is 5. So like if you try to do it for O of you can, if you try to do a linear search for every single day, then it will obviously give you TAD. Why? Because of the time constraint, because of the constraints, because it's n is 10 raised to the power 5 and q is 10 raised to the power 5. For each day you are doing O of n. So for 10 raised to the power 5 days, you will do 10 total of 10 raised to the power 10 operations, and that's not allowed. Okay. So what we can do binary search on the operation. Like for 1 coin, we can find the maximum index which is less than or equal to 1. So this is 0. Like we cannot find any number which is less than or equal to 1. Then for 10, we find the maximum index which is less than or equal to 10, which is this. This is the maximum index less than or equal to 10. So the answer is 4. And for 3, the maximum index here is 1. And for 11, the maximum index is here. So answer is 5. So we can do binary search. The time complexity of it will be q into log of n. Like for each day I am doing binary search. So binary search, it will take log of n, and there are q days. So q into log of n will be something like 10 raised to the power 5 into something like say 15 operations. So 15 into 10 raised to the power 5 is very much less than 10 raised to the power 8. So it will not give TLE. So does anybody have a doubt in the logic part? Okay, so if no one has a doubt in logic, let's code this. There are test cases. No, there are no test cases. Keep this commented. So input n, and then there will be an array of n, size n. Then the array. We need to sort the array because binary search works in sorted arrays only. I'm inputting the number of days, which is q. Now for each of the day, I input the number of points I have on that day. And now I need to do the binary search. How will I do the binary search? I'll define two pointers, extreme pointers.
Hello. For sort function, what is the time complexity?
Sort function, I think the time complexity is n log n. I'm not sure. Aditya, is it n log n, right? Sort function?
N log n.
Yes, n log n it is.
So if you use binary search, then n log n should also be included, no? For time complexity calculation.
For this, but this is out of binary search, right? This is not inside this for loop. This is outside this for loop. So it will not be multiplied, it will be added. So addition won't change the power of time complexity.
Okay.
Did you get it? This is not inside the for loop, this for loop.
Yes, I get it.
Okay, fine. So the left pointer is 0, the right pointer is n minus 1. Then while L is less than equal to R, what I do, middle value is L plus R by 2. Then I will define a function which is check of main and M. I'll just define check in a minute. If check is true, let me define it before you. These are the parameters mid and M. So if A of mid is greater than M, then I return false. I return true. Okay, so but this won't work because this A array is not in the scope of this. Like A is defined within the solve function, so it can only be accessed within the solve function. It can't be accessed in this check function. This is out of scope. So what will I do? I will just make it a global array, and this n also won't work. So I will just make it a huge number, like not huge, the range of this number, this 10 raised to power 5. I make it 10 raised to power 5 plus 1 just for the sake of it. And so yeah, if A of mid is greater than M is my search element. If the middlemost value is greater than M, then I return false, else I return true. Now I do here, check here, if check of mid comma M is coming out to be true, when it will return true, it will return true when A of mid is greater than less than or equal to M. If it is less than or equal to M, then I need to find the highest index of something which is less than or equal to M, right? So if I want to find the highest index, I need to again search in the rightmost part of the array. So I will make L to be mid plus 1, or else I will make R equals to mid minus 1. Yeah, L to be mid plus 1 because I want to check in the rightmost part of the array, and if it is false, that means it is strictly greater than M, then I need to check in the left part of the array, and hence I will do R to be one left than the middlemost element. And now in the finally I will print. Okay, let me ask you guys, what should I print? Should I print L or should I print R, or none, something else? You can raise your hand or write it in chat. What should I print? You can see the code. Which index should I print? Should I print the left index or should I print the right index? L, R, L plus 1, R minus 1. No one? Okay, so if no one got it, let me just explain it. Like in the end, in the final, when we have only one element left, we need to like just check it manually what happens. What we do is we take, when we L just equals to R, and then we check this element. If this satisfies, if this we check if L and R are equal, then mid is also equal to this one only, because L plus R by 2 is equal to L. So we check on this element. If this returns true, what I do, I shift L to the right, one place to the right, and if it returns false, then I shift R to the left. But I know that if I shift L to the left, that means I know that all these elements are rejected already, because we have come from the rightmost part and we have done binary search and we have halving of the arrays. So, and we have finally come to the this point. R is at standing at this point. That means all these values are strictly greater than the required element, right? So, since these all are strictly greater than m, that's why I don't want this particular element, and this particular element return true. That's why, because it returned true, I shifted L to the right, and hence I will return R. Because R is at this position, I will return R because this is the maximum element which is less than or equal to m. Or else, if this element had returned false, then what would have happened? Then R would go to the left, L would have stayed here. I know that this is rejected because it had returned false, and all these also rejected because these are greater than R. So still this is the greatest index which is less than or equal to m. This is rejected, all these are rejected. This is the greatest index which is less than or equal to m, which is still pointed by R. So I need to print R. Actually, I don't want to print R, I want to print R plus 1. Why R plus 1? Because we know that the arrays are 0 indexed and we need to be converted into one indexed. So I want to print R plus 1. So does anybody have a doubt in this part in the code why I printed R plus 1 now? You can ask or raise your hand or write it down in the chat. Okay. So let's test for the sample test case. Okay, so sorry, I need to yeah. Zero 0415. 0415. Okay, sample test cases are running. Let's try submitting this code. Okay, accepted. Okay, so anybody has a doubt in the code, just once again asking. Okay, fine. So no one has doubts. So I'll proceed to the next question, which is coins and triangle. Want you all to read the question once and give you 1 minute for this. Okay, I hope you have read the problem and understood it. So if you want to access the question, I will just put the link in the chat. You can access the question. Anybody wants to give an idea how can we go about this problem? You can raise the hands or write it in the chat. Okay, yeah, Hemant, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, we can just use the formula n into n plus 1 by 2 to know the number of coins required for a height n, and if that n is less than n, we will iterate. If it is greater than, we stop it.
Yeah, that is correct. That is correct, but it has the potential of giving you TLE for a very large amount of n. It can give you TLE for maybe it will just barely pass this. No, it can pass from here, but it can give you TLE also if you iterate from 1 to n. Like your logic is entirely correct. Then if we will calculate n into n plus 1 by 2, and we will find the maximum n for which it is we'll calculate h into h plus 1 by 2 for some h, and we'll calculate the maximum value of h for which the sum is less than n. That is what you are saying, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's try to do this using binary search, because it never gives TLE because it is of log n time complexity. So I guess there is time test cases, and the n value is also pretty large. So I'll uncomment this. There are test cases. I'm inputting n, and then what will I do is that I'll pick two extreme values again. In this case, I don't have a particular right extreme, so I will pick I can pick some huge number also, like 10 raised to power 8, which I should pick that number where I'm pretty sure that the answer won't exceed r. Like the answer can never exceed 10 raised to power 8. So I am choosing this r. So basically we just need to choose any large value of r. It won't give TLE because the complexity is log of n. So now I can do binary search while L less than equal to r again. H I am choosing to be the average of these two. And now again I will call the check function, check of h comma n. If this, now let me just define check. How will it define check? Like if, let me just make it h parameters, change the parameters. Yeah, I'll define required to be the total number of coins which is required, so which is h into h plus 1 by 2. So like if I want to calculate the total number of total height of this triangle to be h, I want to check whether I can form a triangle of height h, then I need the total number of coins to be h into h plus 1 by 2. So this is the required number of coins, and if required is greater than equal to n, no, strictly greater than n, then return false. I cannot form a triangle of height h, or else if it is less than or equal to n, I return true. Yeah, so if check of h comma n comes out to be true, then which means that I have sufficient coins to form a triangle of size h. So that means in the number line, when I try to create a number line, say like this is L, this is some huge value r, check the middle value h. If I have sufficient coin to make a triangle of height h, that obviously I can conclude that I have sufficient coins to make triangles of height less than h. I have sufficient coins for that, but I need to find the maximum h, so I need to find the maximum somewhere here. The maximum has to lie somewhere here. So if this is possible, then I just shift this L one place to the right of the height, or else if it had been false, then that means the maximum value of h lies somewhere to the left part of the array. Then what will I do? I will shift r to the one place to the left of the middlemost element. So if this comes out to be true, I do L equals to h plus 1. I start checking the maximum height in the rightmost part, or else r equals to mid minus 1. And then once again, what I need to print, I can determine using the last particular case when L equals to R. This is R, and R and L are both at the same position. Since R is there, I've already guaranteed that all the heights to the right of it are not possible. And since L is there, I've already guaranteed all the heights to the left of L are possible. So I need to do just a checking for this one. If this, I have sufficient coin for this amount. If this is true, my left goes to the right, but this is going into the rejected area. So the answer will be just R. And if it comes out to be false, R goes to the left and it goes to the accepted area, and this is rejected, and hence I output R. R will be the maximum height, which will be for which I have sufficient coins to form a triangle of height R. Does anybody have doubt in the code? Okay, no one has a doubt in the code. Yes. Let me first try to run that sample test case. Oh, sorry, it's not mid, it's height. Two, 2, 3. Output is 2, 2, 3. 2, 2, 3. Okay, the sample test cases are passing. Let me just submit the code. Hope this works. Okay, accept. Yeah. Anybody has a doubt in the code? Once again, I'm asking. Okay, so no one has doubt. I am just proceeding to the next problem since we have time. Yeah. This is a problem, magic powder. I'm giving you some time to read the problem, or else I can also first share the link to the problem here. Just a second. Okay, I hope you have read the problem. Let me just quickly go through the problem once. Waking up in the morning, Apollinaria decides to bake cookies. To bake one cookie, she needs n ingredients, and for each ingredient, she knows the value of AI, how many grams of this ingredient one needs to bake a cookie. To prepare one cookie, Apollinaria needs to use all n ingredients. Apollinaria has bi gram of the ith ingredient. Also, she has k grams of a magic powder. Each gram of magic powder can be turned into exactly 1 gram of any of the n ingredients and can be used for baking cookies. So you task to determine the maximum number of cookies and which she will be used to make using the ingredients and using the magic powder. So you are given an array of n elements and an array of again n elements. This is array A, this is array B. For each I, AI represents the number of the amount of ingredient, that particular ingredient which you need to bake one cookie, and the BI represents the total amount of that particular ingredient which you have at the moment. Okay, and apart from that, there is something else also, like you are given a magic powder which of k grams. So what will this do? Suppose you have something say 5 here, and you have something like 4 here, like you want at least 5 grams to make one cookie, and you have 4 grams of this particular ingredient. So what you can do, you can consume 1 gram from this magic powder, and this 1 gram you can change to any of the ingredients possible. Like here you can see that there is deficiency of this particular ingredient, so you can convert this 1 gram to this particular ingredient, and this now you have, instead of 4, you have 5 grams of that particular ingredient. So using this magic powder and this arrays, like how much amounts of ingredients you have and the amounts of ingredients you require to make one cookie, how many maximum cookies you can make. So let's go to over to the code. But instead, first of all, before the code, let me just explain you can use binary search for this problem as well. What you will do, you will fix some L, again fix some L and R. What you can do, you can just put it 0 and some grade 10 raised to power say 10 or something like that. So after this, you can just check the middlemost element. Say this is some M. Then for M, you can kind of back calculate whether you can make M cookies using the given array and amount of ingredients you have and the magic powder. So what will actually happen, that how to check whether you can make M cookies or not, you have to like kind of back calculate. How will you back calculate? You will iterate through the entire array. Each time you will iterate through the entire array, and then what you will find, if you have sufficient amount of this B of I to prepare M number of cookies, then you are good to go. Or else, if you find some element where you have less number of amount of ingredients than the required, then you have to use some amount of this magic powder to to fulfill the deficiency of the amount of ingredients that is required. And after entering through the entire array, you can check if you have sufficient amount of magic powder to create the M number of cookies. Does anybody have a doubt in the code? Sorry, in the logic part? Yeah, bits 1 has everything, in fact, not only this, everything. Yeah, so since nobody has doubt, let me proceed to the coding part. Let's check the input. The input contains 2 positive ingredients, N and K. So there are no test cases, so let me just comment this part out. Again, I have to create 2 elements. Sorry, 2 arrays. So Again, I can use binary search for this. I can choose to extreme pointers. I don't know what can be the maximum, so I can take just some pretty huge amount so that I am pretty sure that the answer can't exceed this. While L is equal to R, again M equals to L plus R by 2. Now let's again, I will call the function check on the n m on value of m. If it is possible, then if I can create m number of cookies, then I can definitely create less than m number of cookies. So the maximum should be somewhat greater than m. So I need to check in the right half of the array. L is equal to m plus 1, else R equals to m minus 1. Now what we do for the check function, this m and k, there are two int m. M stands for the number of cookies I want to make, and k stands for the amount of magic powder that I have. Okay, I want to access the arrays again, so I need to make it global instead of local, and this n instead of n, I can put some okay. I think someone is doubt. Okay. Yeah, so now let's implement the check function. What we will do, we will iterate through the entire array. Int for if, like, I want to make m number of cookies, and each cookie requires a of I amount of that particular ingredient. So the required amount is like m into a of I. This is the total number of that particular ingredient which I want, and I have only b of I. So if b of I is greater than equal to required, if I have sufficient amount of that ingredient, then I just continue, I don't do anything. Or else, if I am less than that, then I need to use some amount of magic powder to fulfill this deficiency. So int magic is equal to, the deficiency is nothing but m into a of I minus b of I, and this is the deficiency which is required. And what I do is k minus equals to, I reduce the amount of, now I have, since I used magic amount of magic powder, so this k will be reduced by this amount. Finally, after the entire iteration, I will check if still k is less than 0. If k is less than 0, that means I did not have sufficient amount of magic powder. So return false. If it is greater than or equal to 0, that means I have sufficient amount of ingredient magic powder. So I return true. So if it is true, that means I can make m number cookies. So I increment L to m plus 1, or else I decrement R to m minus 1. That means I move to the left half of the array. And similarly, in this case also, let me just show you once. Like if once we go to the same element L and R, if this is the final m is this, so if I can make this amount of cookies, I shift L to the one place to the right, but I know this all is rejected, this all is accepted number of cookies. So if I go to the rejected area, so the value is, this is the maximum number of cookies which is pointed by R, and also if it is rejected, I shift R to the left, which is into the accepted zone. So finally I print R. So cout R. So let's just test the code, sample test cases once. P, okay. N was not declared in the scope. Okay, yeah, N is also local to this part only. So I need to pass a parameter N also. Yeah, this is also parameter N. Now it is local to this function also. Four. Let's check. Yeah, it's 4. Let's try the second sample test case. Yeah, 3. Sample test case seems to pass. Let's submit this code. Hope this works. Accepted. Yeah. Okay, fine. So anybody has a doubt in the coding part? This was a pretty tricky question rather to compare to the first two. Yeah, Hemant, you can unmute it.
No, if you go to the coding part, we see that if L is equal to R, M is also equal to R, no?
If N equals to R,
M will also become R.
yeah, true. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And if M is equal to R, and if we check it with, we wrote the function check M comma K powder and that no, then it will become L plus 1, no? From the coding part.
Yeah, correct. So if it becomes L plus 1, then what happens? We won't check any further because this is the while condition, L less than equal to R. If L is more goes to the right of R, we break out of the while loop.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Understood.
No doubt?
Yeah, clear.
Yeah, not yeah, for any other people, any doubt? Okay, I guess this is you now got a pretty good idea of how to use binary search in competitive programming problems. So I guess, yeah, we can end the session with this. Aditya, you can just tell them about that log of function.
Yeah, so I'm not going to tell anything about the method, but I'll just tell that there's a method to find the nth Fibonacci number in log n time. So you guys can think about it in 2-3 days. So on Friday, I will be telling you how we can find the nth Fibonacci number in log n time. Until then, you can think of methods. Obviously, if you're going to Google it, answer is going to be there. So yeah, up to you. You can try to think of how we can compute the number in log n time.
Yeah,
So
first try
that's
to think it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, because anyone can Google and find the answer. That's
yeah, true.
But try to just
Anyways,
think, and maybe you will come up with a new method also. Who knows? So yeah, that's it.
True. Yeah. Okay, Aditya, you can stop the recording now, so I can end the session. Thank you everyone for joining. Hope you had a great day.